Welcome back. Today we are going to be hand building a mug. The purpose of today's video is to show you some different hand building techniques, including using a coil, pinching, joining clay together, attaching an object onto another object, and then there's a few tips and tricks as well. Sit back, relax, follow along. I hope that the tutorial is easy enough for you to understand, and if you've got any questions, please let me know in the comments. Alright, so the cup we're going to make today is going to be something like this one here. The handles for about 2 fingers to fit through, and then the rest of your palm will just, hug the side of your cup. I'm going to start with just a ball of clay. One of the things that I like to use when I'm building a cup is just a piece of paper. So I rip a whole bunch of pages from my sketchbook, I tear them up and then just reuse them. So I just find that this is a way that I can, turn my cup around without it getting stuck to the table, because as you know, clay is quite wet and it's not going to move around, and you don't want to be picking a cup up that you've been working on for half an hour and then have it get all squished when you pick it up. So you're just going to start with a ball of clay and a little piece of paper. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a knead in my hands. I'm not going to wedge it today. I'll do a video on wedging a little bit later on. This clay is pretty much straight out of the bag, and I've just rolled it into a ball. So once you've got your little ball, all you're going to do is you're going to roll it just like this, and it will be sort of like a little flying saucer. So once you've got your little flying saucer, what you're going to do is you're going to start squishing it down in the middle. So turning, pressing with your finger and your thumb. We don't want to thin out this part because that's going to form the first part of our wall. So once you've got it relatively thin, put it on your piece of paper. Okay, these parts here are going to form our wall of our mug. So we're going to start just by, so all I'm doing is I'm just pinching with my finger and my thumb, my index finger. And I'm spinning, and this is where the paper comes in really handy, because your paper will allow your cup to spin on the table. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to build our first coil. So we're going to go back to our ball of clay, we're going to squeeze off a section about this big. You'll find some different ways that you like to coil depending on, your preferences. For me, coiling took a long time for me to get a way to do it properly. I always found that when I rolled them, they would just kind of break off. So you're going to start with it in your hands, just rolling back and forward. And at the moment it's quite flat. So what you can also do is you can roll it on the table. Thinking about controlling our pressure as much as we can. Not push, we don't want to squish it too hard. We want to control our pressure back and forward, kind of move my fingers along. And the aim of this is that we're going to end up with something that's nice and relatively even. So if you notice that it's thicker in one section, you're going to roll on that section a little bit more. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use our scratchy tool. If you don't have one of these, this is my favorite tool to use. You can see one of the teeth is bent, which is really frustrating. Really awesome to texture clay with as well. I made some Kurinuki cups with this tool. I will put a picture up so you can see. So it's really fun to use this tool for texture as well. If you don't have one of these, you can just use your skewer. So if you're just using a skewer, you would just be scratching like this. Now we're good at using with this tool. With this tool, it kind of does it for me. So it's just a little bit quicker. Now you're gonna scratch on your coil, and you're gonna scratch on the bottom of your mug. Then we're going to lay this on top, really gently. You're going to get your skewer tool and you're going to cut through both of them. So that's 1 and 2. And you're just going to pinch them together, just like that. So at the moment we've got it joined at the side. This is what it's looking like. Your little scraps and put them back into your ball. The aim of this next part is that we're going to be blending this coil into the base. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to smooth the outside. So I'm going to push down with my finger and you'll see that line disappears. Alright, once you've got it smooth, you can start thinking about smoothing it off so you're going to have a nice smooth surface. Okay, the next part that we're going to smooth this inside section in here. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I've done to the outside. I'm just going to push it down to get rid of that line. But this time, because we're on the inside, I'm going to swipe my thumb. So I'm going to push down and swipe. And I'm supporting it from the outside here. So I'm not just pushing on the cut by itself on the inside. I'm supporting it on the outside with my fingers. I'm going to push down, swipe. Push down, swipe. Push down, swipe. I'm going to go all the way around. And what the swiping is doing is it's helping compress our clay. Compressing our clay, essentially all it's going to do is make it so that all the clay particles are going to align up really nicely together. You won't have any air in there. If you do have an air bubble, it will look like a little raised, almost like a pimple, I guess. If that happens, all you need to do is kind of pop it open and then brush over it with your fingers and it should go away. If you're getting your clay straight out of the bag, it's less likely to happen. But if you've made a piece and then scrunched it back up because it hasn't worked, you probably will get air bubbles. So just be on the lookout for those. By compressing our clay, we're also taking the opportunity to consider the thickness of our clay together. Alright, once you've got the whole way around, you're just gonna look at the inside. We want to keep it nice and smooth because we can't get into the middle once we've got it all the way up. As you'll see, this is really thick here. Now, one of the benefits of rolling a thick coil is that we can use some other hand building techniques as well. We're actually going to be doing some pinching. When we're pinching, we're not just going to pinch like this. We're actually going to pinch and squeeze. What that's going to do is it's going to send the clay, instead of just kind of outwards, it's going to send it upwards. So we're going to pinch up. So this is the side that I pinched, this is the side I haven't pinched. You can see there's a difference in the height. So you're going to keep pinch, squeeze, pinch, squeeze. So that's going to thin the clay out down here, and it's also going to give us some more height, so we need to use less coils. Work smarter, not harder. Am I right? Okay, so you can see in comparison to before, we have got a thinner area. One of the aims that we want to have is that the clay is even thickness the whole way up, so that's just something to consider as you are pinching the whole way around. I can feel that that part's a bit thicker, I can feel that this part's a bit thinner, so just be aware of that and you can pinch to change what you want to do. So the next thing we're going to do, we're just going to keep rolling coils. The only reason that you would maybe need to add water from your bowl is if your clay is really dry. So if you feel like your clay is wet enough, and only you can tell that because you're the one sitting there holding it, if you feel like it's wet enough that it's going to join together, you won't need to add water. You can add a little bit, but the more water you add, the more liquid will sit in that join and it won't be in the rest of your clay, and that is when you'll get a crack. Quickly talk about shrinkage. Shrinkage essentially just means that your clay, during the process that we've talked about in the last video, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up above, but from when it is a ball of wet clay to when it is fully finished firing, it will shrink a certain percentage. So if your clay on the bag says that it has an 11% shrinkage rate, you know that that cup is going to shrink about 11%. Something like a mug, it really won't matter too much, but this is where travel mugs and things like that that can be more complicated because you'd have to fit a lid on that. So just something to think about. All right, one thing I wanted to make note of is that if you're wanting it to go around and in, when you place the next coil, if you're starting to get it to flare, if it's flaring outwards, place your coil on the inner edge inside here. So we're going to place it on the inside section. So we're probably going to measure it a little bit smaller. So what you'll see is instead of it sitting directly on top, I've got a little bit of a lip there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly what I did before in terms of just pushing it down. This part's really important when you're doing your push and squeeze, so our pinching. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get it so it goes inwards. So I'm sort of angling my squeeze a little bit, and you can already see like that is so much higher in comparison to what's happening down here. Okay, so at the moment we've got, this is our sort of shape. Now what I want to do to get to this shape is I want to curve this section out. What we also call that is bellying out your mug. But I'm going to be using my thumb again, and I'm going to be using this part of my thumb. So I'm going to put my thumb in and I'm going to swipe up. This is where you're going to really thin your clay out. And then if you get to a point where your thumb is too short, like my thumb is a bit too short at the point of the size of this mug, I'm going to put my fingers in. So I'm going to put my fingers in and I'm going to do the exact same motion. I'm going to swipe up. If you think one area is really thick when you move your fingers around the cup, that's when you've got the opportunity to kind of press it, pinch it a little bit, even it out as much as you can, because you won't get that opportunity later on once it's dry. So you can see here, this part is lumping out, which is what we want because we want this to be a curve. This part I haven't done yet. So I'm going to put my hands in. I'm going to brush my fingers up and you'll start to get that curve. And what this is still compressing the clay, but it's also going to be thinning it out. Make sure you're thinking about the outside shape. Sometimes I think what can help is if you put your camera up in front of you so you can see the outside, or a mirror, look at the outside shape from that angle, or you can like bob down and look at it every so often. But if you can look at it across the way, it's really helpful. What we want to try and avoid is any big jumps in the curve. So as you can see here, there's a slight one there and a slight one there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just push that out a little bit, and then the same on this side here. Okay, the rim of your cup is so important because you are going to be drinking out of it. It's going to sit on your lips, and the nicer the rim of your cup is when you make your cup, the better your cup will be to drink out of. So consider what it would feel like to actually put your mouth on the rim of that cup. Don't do it with wet clay. But what you need to think about is that you need to have a nice thin rim with a curved edge. Of course, we want it to be as even as possible. I like to put a little bit of a bumpy rim on my cup. I don't think that impacts the way that you drink out of them at all. If anything, it gives you sort of a little area for your mouth to go. I'll show you a couple of examples of that as well. You might have a lumpier outside edge, or you might have a really straight cup. You might have a cup that's really smooth or very dainty. You've just got to find the right style for your art practice. So maybe think about a cup that you really love, and what are the features of that cup that you think you would want to include in yours. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make our handle. We're going to make a handle that's going to match the characteristics of our cup. Now, depending on what you have made, that will change what your handle will look like. So we're gonna roll out a coil. I generally would run my finger over it just to compress it a little bit. You could run a sponge over it if you wanted to. Let's see, so I'm just gonna use my tool and I'm just gonna chop it. Now the handle I'm looking at making today is going to be one a little bit like this. And instead of just pulling it over, I'm gonna gently bend it. I want quite a circular handle. Now, depending on what you want, you might want one that is more pointy or longer. So just cut what you feel like is appropriate to the cup that you're making. I'm gonna measure it where I want it to be. Maybe a bit lower, probably about here. I'm gonna use my pointy tool or your skewer. I'm going to just mark it. I'm not cutting all the way through, I'm just marking my clay. So now you can see I've got a clear marker where it's going to be. You can also see I've done it crooked because I'm doing it in the camera. So I'm just going to move that over a little bit. And then I'm going to attach it onto here. Now, you can use water if your clay is dry. If you've left your handle aside to dry a little bit, you can use water. So we're going to take our handle. I've got my hand on the inside of the cup. I'm going to be pressing on where that score mark is. Pushing my clay into it, just gently, don't want to deform my handle, and then I'm going to do the top one as well. So I've got my hand where the score mark is, and I'm going to push my clay into it. So my handle is attached. Now if you just left it like this, the likelihood is that that's probably going to crack. We need to do a little bit more work. We're not finished there. We're going to add another bit of clay. We're not going to add this size clay though. We're going to roll a really thin coil. And wrap it around. Just like when we were doing coils before, we're going to just chop it off there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use half of this coil on the handle and I'm going to use half of it on the cup. And that's it, we're finished. Just kidding. So what we're actually gonna do now is, now that we've got the basic part, now that we've got the basic part smoothed, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our finger. Fingers are one of the best tools, I think, because you can really control where the clay is going and what's happening with it. We're gonna be smoothing half onto the cup, just like when we pushed it down, and half onto the handle. Short passes. Here's an example of something that I've used called wax on. You can see that's wax there. It will slow down the drying process. Tip is to put wax resist on your handles. So as you guys saw with my little vase here, this is something we're going to talk about in the next video with attaching objects onto a clay body. It's really helpful with drying slowly. So I find that if you do have any trouble with joining things together, that wax resist is going to be super helpful. If you're intending on doing a lot of pottery, just buy a bottle. It's going to be super helpful with glazing as well. What will happen is this part here, because it's smaller, will dry quicker. One thing that you can do, so this cup I did yesterday, it's quite a lot firmer than the other cup. One thing that you can do is you can take your little bowl of water and a sponge and you can just start smoothing out that surface. So this is probably what I would do on day 2. For my practice, the fact that it's bumpy adds to the character. So I don't want mine to be totally smooth like it's been thrown on a wheel. If I wanted a cup that looked like it had been thrown on a wheel, I would just throw it on a wheel. Make sure you give your cup some character. It's essentially a extension of you and who you are. So your cup needs to have some type of character to show that. And that might be that your cup's really straight and smooth. It might be that it's really wonky and a bit crazy. But that is how you're going to be really happy with your final product, and it's going to show, a part of you in whatever piece that you make. And then once you're finished, the last thing that you need to do is just let it dry. How to dry your cup. or your mug. Now, when you're drying, you need to make sure that you are drying it evenly. What you want to do is you want to put it somewhere that's not drafty. You want to put some plastic over the top of it. You can use a shopping bag, a bin bag, a Tupperware container, a glass dish, anything that you can close the lid on or cover your cup with. If you're going to put it in a glass dish or a Tupperware container, you want to leave the lid off a little bit so that air can get in, otherwise it's going to get really condensation-y. Once you have started drying it slowly, you want to every so often let a bit more air in. So after a couple of days, you might go in and you might take the plastic bag off a little bit, leave a bit of a gap. As it's drying, you want to turn it. So, every day, go in and check on your cup, see how it's going, maybe give it a little turn. If you do get any cracks in it, they will open up further in the kiln. So when it gets really hot, those cracks will open in the bisque firing, and again when you glaze it in the high fire. So I would suggest take your drying seriously, be attentive, and once it's dry, it's dry. You just need to be really careful with it. So try not to bump it into anything. When your work is dry, you will need to go get it fired. So if you are wanting to find a place, one, to buy your clay, two, to fire your clay, I would be doing a Google search of your local area and a clay stockist. If you are from Melbourne and you are not sure, please follow me on Instagram, send me a direct message. I will get back to you with some places that will be suitable, that are able to fire your work. At the moment in Melbourne, there's nowhere open, obviously, because we're in a stage for lockdown. What you will need to do is just let your work dry. It can dry for a year. It can sit there and it will be fine. Something that you need to make sure you do is you need to clean your area, especially if you're working in your home. So you need to make sure that you're actually wiping down several times. So this sponge still has clay in it. I need to go and rinse it, wipe it down. This dust, if you are breathing it in, you can get a thing called silicosis. So make sure you clean your area really, really well. Alright guys, that's all that I have for you today. Make sure you subscribe so that you will see the next video, which will be attaching handles, objects to vases. So we're going to be looking at some different vase forms and how you can build some interesting forms at home. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Follow me on Instagram. You can always DM me there if you're looking for a clay supplier. If you do build a cup, please tag me on Instagram. I'd love to see what you're making and see how these videos are helping you to stay connected and stay creative. Thank you so much for watching.